Angelicus Spurbs.
Welcome to today's episode of Spurbs Herbs. Today we're doing episode 80. We're going to be talking about something I didn't see any statistics on this, but I actually think it's probably the most commonly used herb, other than maybe if you put coffee in that category. But we're going to be talking about Blond Psyllium, which is one type of psyllium, but psyllium in general is incredibly commonly used. And the species is Plantago ovata. So we're going to get into that. So hang on and let's get going. Today's episode, we'll be looking at another traditional herb of the world, Plantago ovata, or Blond Psyllium. This is commonly used as a fiber supplement, but can it also help diabetes and cholesterol? We're going to find out. As always, we will do our deep dive into this herb and look at its traditional uses and its preparation, interactions, and cautions. And as usual, we will be adding something a little different. We're going to discuss cannabis and how it acts on the body. It's going to be another interesting trek into the exciting universe of herbs. Please stay tuned and join us. Before we get into today's topics, I just wanted to remind you that I've been teaching for quite a while now on a wide variety of topics. If you like this podcast and want to explore more of my courses, they are available at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org and include a ton of different topics, including my drug herb series, looking at drugs and how they interact with herbs and vice versa, several ethics and safety courses, Chinese medical research, several treatment of condition courses such as arthritis, neck and back pain, COVID, and depression and anxiety, and one of my all-time favorite courses, the Chinese Herbal First Aid Kit. And they're all available at a reasonable cost, and you can get an additional, so even without this discount, they're quite reasonable, but you can get an additional 20% off using the code SH20OFF. That's SH20OFF. And so please check them out and see if there's anything you'd be interested in. So let's talk about how cannabis affects the body. Marijuana or cannabis has been increasingly legalized in the United States with the latest change. This happened in the last month or two. The latest change being the federal government is going to reclassify it from its most restrictive drug class. In other words, it's not going to be in the same category of drugs as cocaine and amphetamines, methamphetamines, stuff like that. So it's going to be easier. It's not going to be as illegal as it was before. For my online course, An Evidence-Based Approach to Cannabis, let's discuss how cannabis affects the body. Cannabis has over 420 known constituents, with anywhere from 60 to 120 of them being cannabinoids. So if you haven't heard this term before, cannabinoid, it actually is defined as constituents unique to cannabis. So about anywhere from what is that? That's about 30%, I'd say about 15 to 30% of the constituents in cannabis are only found in cannabis. So that's interesting. And those are known as cannabinoids. The cannabinoids affect the endocannabinoid system in the body. So endo meaning inside. And so this is the inside, the endogenous, the within system that cannabinoids can affect. And we have a whole system that is affected by these cannabinoids. There are several important cannabinoids, especially delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, which is often considered the active ingredient. We'll talk about it briefly, of cannabis. There's cannabidiol, CBD, if you've heard. I mean, if you go anywhere, I don't know where you guys live. Where I live, there isn't there may be now, but there wasn't a gas station that wasn't advertising CBD. You saw CBD everywhere. Every cigarette shop, every gas station would say, we have CBD. So that's cannabidiol. We have cannabinol, or CBN. We have delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol. So remember, delta-9 was THC. Delta-8 is a different form of it. And cannabichromine, or CBC, and finally cannabidiol, or cannabidiol. So those are all the different chemicals, important cannabinoids that are in cannabis. Cannabinoids work on an already existing system in the body where endocannabinoids can affect nerves. So we have endocannabinoids, which means we create our own similar chemicals to these cannabinoids. These act on two known receptors, CB1 and CB2, which are G protein coupled receptors. Now, we haven't really talked about G protein coupled receptors. Those are interesting because they're coupled with something called the G protein, which utilizes guanine triphosphate, so GTP. Don't worry about that so much. That's why they're called G protein, though. What is important about these G protein coupled receptors is that they can indulge in something called amplification. So one small activation of one of these receptors can create a cascade that can then go on and actually affect a lot of different things. So that's what's important about the G protein. It's a very, very, very common receptor system within the human body. So lots of different G protein coupled receptors. And there are two known non-CB1, non-CB2, CB-like receptors. So there's two known CB-like receptors. We said there's only two CB receptors, CB1 and CB2. But there's also two that are like them but are different, and one's called non-CB1 and non-CB2. Okay. There are several well-known endocannabinoids. So again, these are things that we actually create in our bodies. One of those is N-arachidinoyl ethanolamide, or anandamide, which is also known as AEA. 2-arachidinoyl glycerol, 2-AG. Virodhamine, or virodamine, I believe is VIRODHAMINE. N-arachidoyl dopamine, or NADA, NADA. Nolidine, and others, of which the first two are the most understood. So that's the AEA and the 2AG. CB1 receptors are highly concentrated in the neurons of the central nervous system, especially the cerebral cortex, hippocampus, lateral caudate putamen, substantia nigra pars reticulate, the amygdala, which, if you're familiar with the amygdala, is very important with emotions, and cerebellum. So these are really kind of can be basic, but the cerebral cortex is our higher thinking centers. These placements underscore their role in cognition, brain function, and analgesia, so pain relief. Low levels are present in peripheral neurons in the heart, adrenals, bladder, vascular and lung smooth muscle cells, and the intestines. CB1 receptors play a role in regulation of movement, sleep, emotion, appetite, body temperature, memory storage, and pain. Activation can inhibit type 5-HT3 ion channels. So type 5-HT3 is serotonin, so can inhibit type serotonin type ion channels, modulate the production of nitric oxide after sodium channel conductance, alter sodium channel conductance, which is very important in how nerves work, and activate the sodium hydrogen exchanger. So lots of interesting chemical effects of these. CB2 receptors are found primarily in the periphery, located in the immune and hematopoietic system. So the immune system, of course, we know what that means. The hematopoietic systems are the systems that create blood, basically. So hematopoietic means creation of blood. They're also present in the brain and other tissues, though not as prominently as the CB1 receptors. Their presence in the lymphoid organs, lymph tissues, explains its effects on cell-mediated immunity by inhibiting T cells, cytokine secretion, and humoral responses from B cells. So this is all part of our immune system. And these, of course, can explain anti-inflammatory effects. So one of the big things, and one of the reasons why CBD is everywhere, is because it's supposed to be really help inflammation. Anandamide is a partial agonist at both CB1 and CB2, but has a higher affinity for CB1. NADA also prefers CB1. 2AG is a complete agonist at both receptors, though it shows less affinity than an anandamide for either of them. So if there's anandamide is present, then that's more likely to activate the CB1 and CB2. But if 2-AG does get into the receptors of CB1 and CB2, it completely activates them, while anandamide only partially activates them. Rhodamine appears to prefer CB2. So it's a little in the weeds, but all right, we'll move on. THC is the substance that produces a high, which includes euphoria, relaxation, altering of perception, and intensification of ordinary sensory experiences such as eating, watching films, and music listening. There can be excessive laughter and talkativeness, and impaired cognition, motor skills, and reaction time. Perception of time may be altered, and tactile sensations become more intense. Visual hallucinations may occur. So Guindon and Homan summarize some of how anti-nociception occurs. So anti-nociception means pain relief. So nociception is our nerves that receive pain impulses. So anti-nociception means prevents the propagation of pain reception. So when administered systemically, cannabinoids suppress nociceptive neurons in the spinal dorsal horn, so this is part of the spinal cord, and the ventral posterior lateral nucleus of the thalamus. Remember, the thalamus is, I always like to think of it as a traffic cop of the brain. It tells where signals should go in the brain. These effects do not alter the physiological effects of non-nociceptive neurons. In other words, if it's not a neuron that is supposed to conduct pain, then these do not alter those effects at all. Neither does this explain motor effects of these compounds. So this isn't the end-all be-all of what's happening with these chemicals, but it can explain why it helps with pain. Cannabinoid receptors have been demonstrated on primary afferent neurons. So afferent means going towards the brain. So that is so primary afferent neurons, so these are what go towards the brain at pre and postsynaptic sites in the spinal cord. Let's not get into all that. The synapses is where neurons connect, basically. They actually don't connect. It's actually the space between neurons, but they send neurotransmitters which propagate to the next neuron. Okay, let's not get too into that. In the spinal cord, using receptor binding and quantitative autoradiography. Okay, so that's how they found this out. In the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, CB1 receptors have been found on interneurons and on astrocytes. So interneurons are between neurons, cells between neurons. So neurons that are between neurons. So that's good. If they're there, they can kind of slow that down. And astrocytes are helper cells for the neurons. Upregulation of cannabinoid receptors is also observed in the spinal cord following nerve injury. In other words, when you have a nerve injury, where it's trying to help you with the pain by upregulating those receptors. Okay, so this is a brief overview of sort of the biochemical approach. Let's talk about cannabis according to Chinese medicine. So starting with the Shendong Bensao Jing, which, if you remember, we're going to talk about it some more. Not in today's episode, but in our next episode. The Shendong Bensao Jing is the first book of individual herbs that's still existing in Chinese medicine. So basically, if an herb is in Shendong Bensao Jing, it's amongst the oldest herbs in the Chinese Materia Medica. So starting with the Shendong Bensao Jing, Da Ma, which is the modern Chinese name, or Cannabis sativa herba, is acrid with a balanced temperature. It treats the 7 damages, according to the Shendong Bensao Jing. It treats the 7 damages, disinhibits the 5 viscera, and precipitates the blood and cold qi. It is considered a superior class herb, which is interesting because superior class herbs are those herbs that you can take on a regular basis and will provide health for you, at least according to a 2,000-year-old book. I forgot to say this is written in 200 CE, so almost 2,000 years old. And it continues to say larger doses may make one behold ghosts and frenetically run about. Well, that sounds like a lot of cannabis. The seed is sweet, supplements the center, and boosts qi. Now, we do currently relatively frequently, use huo ren, which is the seed. So that is commonly used. It is denatured, so it can actually grow any pot if you get the seeds, but it is cannabis seeds. So the seed is sweet, supplements the center and boosts chi. Long-term use may make one fat, strong, and never senile. Well, making one fat, you might be hungry, but with cannabis in general, but I don't know so much about the seeds. Modern usage of the seed Huo Mao Ren agrees that it is sweet and neutral and enters the small intestine, large intestine, and spleen. It nourishes and moistens the intestines, nourishes yin and clears heat and promotes healing of sores. Chen Chen, which is one of our major textbooks that we use in Chinese medicine for herbs, individual herbs. Chen Chen add that it moistens dryness and benefits the hair and enters the stomach rather than the small intestine. In both of these texts, it is in the moist laxative category of herbs. There's some evidence cannabis may have been used in combination with other herbs as an anesthetic for surgery in China. Some speculate it may have been part of Hua Tuo's technique, though there's no direct proof other than linguistic commonalities. So if you're not familiar with Hua Tuo, he's considered one of the greatest doctors in Chinese medicine, and he was known for doing surgery, so very interesting. So a reference to an anesthetic formula using cannabis is included in the Bian Chui Xin Shu, or Heart Text of Bian Chui, written sometime between 1127 and 1270 CE. So that's very interesting. And that's it for cannabis. At this point, it's just a brief introduction. And with that introduction to cannabis and Chinese medicine, let's get into today's herb, which is not a Chinese medical herb. It's Plantago ovata, or Blond Psyllium. This is in the family Plantaginaceae, and the species is specifically Plantago ovata forsk. Remember that this is FORSSK period. That's short for the botanist who classified it. So we see that in technical species names often. The medicinal part is mostly the seeds of Blond Psyllium, though the epidermis and fresh plant may also have medicinal uses. So the seeds, actually, the epidermis of the seeds, the husk, is actually also very important here. Lots of other names include desert Indian wheat, flea seed. If you look at the picture we have on the first one, it's the size of a flea. That's why it's called a flea seed. Blonde plantain, blood plantago, Blond Psyllium, which of course with an E, so you see it with an E and without an E. Dietary fiber, sometimes it's just called dietary fiber. Englishman's foot, Ashwagandha, Ipagola, Isabgola, Isabgul, Ispagol. All of those are Ayurvedic names. I think it's different dialects within Hindi and various Indian languages. Pale psyllium, psyllio, psyllium blonde. It's just psyllium. Psyllium blonde, this one with a Y rather than an I in psyllium. Psyllium husk, Indian plantago, espagula. Again, that's going to be ispagula. That's another Ayurvedic name. Sand plankton, spogul, ispagol. I've come close to that. There's an H in there, so that's why it's the same thing as ispagol, but one has an H after the G and one doesn't. P. decumbens, P. ispagula, P. fastigiata, and P. insularis. All those last ones, the P stands for Plantago, and they're basically other species names other than Plantago ovata. However, those are considered to be not in appropriate use at this point. You see them, they're older names for it, basically. That's a lot of names. Moving on. So when looking at alternative names, I looked at WebMD, which usually has a really good list of other names for the herbs we cover, and I almost face-palmed. It listed a relatively common Chinese herb, Che Chienza. That wouldn't be the first time I started out covering a Western herb and found out it was the same as a Chinese herb. Actually, that makes perfect sense because the Chinese these aren't solidified from 2,000 years ago. There's a lot of Chinese herbs that are modern herbs that came from the West, so it's not completely unreasonable. This can happen because while we learn Latin names when studying Chinese herbs, often they are pharmaceutical Latin names, which can be and are different than accepted botanical species, though this is happening less, as like the newest version of the Materia Medica does this a lot less than the one that I studied originally. So I saw the Chachienza and went, uh-oh. Well, it turns out the Chachienza is the same genera, Plantago, but is a different species, either Asiatica or depressa. It's probably similar enough so that if we can't find there isn't a good Chinese description of our herb today, it will probably be a good alternative. So let's find out. And we're actually going to find out it is a really good alternative. So we're going to continue that thought. So let's talk about the Plantaginaceae family. There is some controversy over whether this family should be named Veronicaceae, but Plantaginaceae is currently more accepted. The Plantaginaceae or plantain family is a diverse family of flowering plants covering about 107 genera and 1,900 species. Snapdragons and foxglove digitalis are members of this family. And I was just talking about foxglove when I was talking when I did my cardiac drugs just a couple weeks ago. Or was it last week? I can't remember anymore. So actually very important, foxglove, very important. Have a lot of herbal stuff and some serious pharmaceuticals have been derived from it. The banana-like plantains are not part of this family. Same word, plankton, but this is not, there are no banana-like plantains in this plankton family. So don't ask me where the names come from. There's lots of history there. Let's talk about, speaking of history, let's talk about the history of Plantago ovata, which has been used medicinally for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It is used in Ayurvedic medicine as well as Western herbology. Several websites refer to its use in Ayurvedic medicine for 5,000 years. This seems pretty ludicrous on the face of things. There are no written records that go anywhere near that far back, and any archaeological evidence would be really important and fairly well known. If they're quoting 5,000 years, they should quote the archaeological evidence. But it does speak to the fact that this has been used for a long time in Ayurvedic medicine. So there does seem to be, the Ayurvedic texts can go back 2,000 but 2,500 years. I don't know if it's in those, but it's not far off from that 2,000, 2,500 years. So I think thousands of years in Ayurvedic medicine seems reasonable, not 5,000. It appears that it is used in Arabian and Persian medicine, and it certainly has roots in European medicine. In the U.S., it was first commercialized by John Harvey Kellogg, yes, that Kellogg, and was sold at his Battle Creek Sanitarium in the 1920s. That's where Corn Flakes was developed and the Kellogg cereal company came from. So, yes. So they were the ones who first commercialized it. If you haven't looked into the history of Corn Flakes, it's interesting. And it does start with this Battle Creek Sanitarium, which was incredibly popular in the 1920s. And so, he was kind of the, Dr. Weil, Dr. Chopra of that age, very well known. In 1998, the FDA approved the Food and Drug Administration of the U.S., approved the following health claim for psyllium: 3 to 12 grams soluble fiber from psyllium seed husk, when included as part of a diet low in saturated fat and cholesterol, may reduce the risk of heart disease. Now, the key word there is may reduce. There actually isn't a ton of evidence on this. We're going to talk about the evidence later on. There certainly isn't any harm in doing this, and it probably helps heart disease, but we're not entirely sure it does. Okay, so let's talk about its traditional uses. An article in the Plants for a Future database says psyllium has been used as a safe and effective laxative for thousands of years in Western herbal medicine. I always love it when people say thousands of years, 5,000 years, all these things, because they're saying it without any evidence, and it's hard to say what was happening thousands of years ago. So unless we have some evidence, I want to see it. So like one of the nice things about Chinese medicine is when I say the Shendong Ben Sao Jing, We know that's 1,800 years old, almost 2,000 years, and that's pretty definitive. But it's not necessarily a lot of that going around in Western herbal medicine, though there's some, some of the ancient Greek medicines and stuff like that. So both the dried seeds and the seed husks are demulcent, emollient, and laxative. So these are, I like to say, old-timey science words. They're not, they're used, but still. So let's check in. So they're demulcent. Demulcent means a mucilaginous or oleaginous preparation that forms a soothing, protective film over a mucous membrane and relieving minor pain and inflammation of that membrane. That's what a demulcent is. So mucilaginous means, mucoid, it's like slimy and thick, that sort of thing. An emollient is a preparation that softens the skin. So it is demulcent, emollient, and laxative, which of course promotes the passing of stool. They are used in the treatment of dysentery, catarrhal conditions of the genital urinary tract, inflamed membranes of the intestinal canal, etc. So those are some of its traditional uses. The PDR for herbal medicines says it was approved by Commission E. Commission E is from Europe, the European Union, and they're older now. That was in the 1990s, but they looked at evidence at that point. So if something is approved by Commission E, it usually has at least some evidence behind it. So it was approved by Commission E for constipation, diarrhea. Interesting, those are technically opposites, but it can be used for both constipation and diarrhea, raised levels of cholesterol, and hemorrhoids. They continue to say psyllium is used for disorders where easy bowel movements with a loose stool is desirable, e.g. in patients with anal fissures and hemorrhoids following anal rectal surgery and during pregnancy. In folk medicine, the herb is used internally for inflammation of the mucous membrane of the urogenital tract and gastrointestinal tract and dysentery. Externally, psyllium is used for gout, rheumatism, furuncles, and as an analgesic, so pain reliever. Continuing with traditional uses, let's head into Ayurvedic medicine. So according to www.easyayurveda.com, Plantago ovata's basic Ayurvedic properties include for rasa or taste, it's madura or sweet. For guna or qualities, snigda or has moisture, guru or heavy, and pachila or slimy. That is kind of what it does. The virya or energy is madura or sweet. The vipaka or post-digestive effect is madura or undergoes a sweet taste after digestion. And the dosha or constitution is vata, pitta, shamaka. Again, I'm not great with my pronunciation, so I apologize. Reduces vitiated vata and pitta dosha. And some say it balances down kapha and pitta doshas. So if you want to know more about this, I do a couple deep dives on some of my early Ayurvedic medicines. I believe ashwagandha is one of those. And if it goes into what all this kind of breaks down. So if you want to look into that a little bit more, then I would recommend looking at those older superb herbs. But in the meantime, www.easyayurveda.com continues. Prasanth continues to describe traditional Ayurvedic actions. That's the doctor who wrote the article. Externally, it relieves burning sensation and edema. External application is indicated in vata, pittaja type of headache, inflammation, erysipelas, which is a skin infection, boils, etc. Treating the respiratory system, it expels out vitiated kapha dosha indicated in dry cough. In excretion, it induces urine production, is indicated in painful micturition, or that's urination, UTI, urinary tract infection, etc. And it is indicated in general weakness and promotes body strength. WebMD says this herb is used and is effective for constipation. It is lightly effective for heart disease prevention and dyslipidemia, so cholesterol issues. It is possibly effective for diabetes, diarrhea, hemorrhoids, irritable bowel syndrome, helping the adverse effects of the weight loss drug Orlistat. And they say it is possibly, quote, possibly ineffective, unquote, for non-cancerous growths in the large intestine and rectum or colorectal edema. So there you go. So let's talk about dosage and preparation. According to the PDR for herbal medicines, the whole or coarsely chopped drug, as well as other galenic preparations, are used internally. Sufficient fluid must be taken with the drug. 150 milliliters of water per 5 grams of drug. 150 milliliters of water is about 6 ounces. One study did show a greater effect of psyllium on cholesterol after mixing with food. The dose should be taken 1/2 hour to 1 hour after taking other medication. The powder products should be administered as 1 teaspoonful, that's 3.4 grams to 6 grams of drug, in 8 ounces of fruit juice or cool water. Either stir briskly or shake for 3 to 5 seconds, depending on the specific product. And psyllium may be taken up to 3 times daily. Going back to Ayurvedic medicine with that Ayurvedic website, Easy Ayurvedic website, easyayurveda.com website. They state the dosage is 5 to 10 grams of the seed or seed husks. They continue to say the seed husk of ashwagandha, which is a name I'm not sure we covered, but it's one of the Indian names, Ayurvedic names, is soaked in water for a couple of hours and later is consumed to treat distension of abdomen, constipation, and flatulence. The seed of isabgol, again, another name. They use different names of the same thing here. The seed of isabgol is made into powder, and the powder is consumed in a dose of 3 to 5 grams to treat burning sensation, excessive thirst in the body, and fever. The seeds are fried in ghee, so clarified butter, and consumed to treat irritable bowel syndrome. Seeds of isabgol are made into paste and applied externally in cases of herpes, localized swelling with burning sensation, and area affected with pustules. Cold infusion of the seeds of isabgol is consumed in a dose of 30 to 40 milliliters to treat retention of urine. So that's a lot. Well, cold infusion, I guess, 30 to 40 milliliters. Okay, it's not a lot necessarily. Still on dosage and preparation, WebMD says Blond Psyllium has most often been used by adults in doses of 3 to 24 grams by mouth daily for up to 20 weeks. Always drink at least 8 ounces of fluids for every 3 to 5 grams of husk or 7 grams of seed. Very important you drink water with this. In fact, when we get to cautions, that comes up again later. Quality of this. It was difficult to find anything on what makes good quality Plantago ovata. Having said this, there are some concerns with preparations of this herb on the market. ConsumerLab.com. Now, I mentioned this a lot in my teaching, and I love it. ConsumerLab.com is a fantastic website. You do need to pay to do it, but what they have great monographs on a whole bunch of different herbal supplements, herbal and non-herbal supplements, and they also test products, which I love. It's like Consumer Reports for supplements. Love it. So that's Consumer Lab, run by a doctor who I think really knows his stuff. So ConsumerLab.com says heavy metal, especially lead, is present in many common psyllium supplements. Out of the 8 brands they tested, 5 of them, including very common and well-known brands, had lead levels above recommended levels. They also said there are counterfeit products on the market, which seems odd to me. These aren't expensive products to begin with. The bottom line is to try to find tests and confirm reliable sources of this herb. So the bottom line is you might want to check ConsumerLab.com before getting into these supplements. So Chinese medical actions. As we mentioned, there is a closely related Chinese herb, Cai Qianza. It is so similar that Chen and Chen, again, one of our major textbooks that we use in Chinese herbology, so similar. I don't have the book, so I don't know the actual name of it, but it's a great book. It is so similar that Chen and Chen have an author's comment about this herb. And it says, there are many species of Plantago within the family of Plantaginaceae. In traditional Chinese medicine, Plantago depressa and Plantago asiatica are the 2 commonly used species. for they are widely available on the Asian continent. Beyond the Asian continent, Plantago psyllium and Plantago arenaria can be found in Spain, and Plantago ovata is found in southern Europe and northern Africa, which is, of course, our herb today. According to the literature, all species of Plantago have similar functions and indications and can be used interchangeably. Therapeutic effects include diuresis, promotion of regular bowel movement, and antibacterial and antifungal effects. So with all of this in mind, let's look at the Chinese medical actions of Cai Qianzi and apply them to Plantago ovata. So Bensky et al., that's our other big, I usually use 3 big textbooks for single herb. Bensky is another one of those. So Bensky and his team say this herb is sweet and cold and enters the bladder, kidney, liver, and lung. It promotes urination and clears damp heat, promotes urination to solidify the stool, clears the eyes, and expels phlegm and stops cough. So those would be its Chinese functions. Chen similarly say it clears damp heat and resolves dampness and stops diarrhea, clears liver heat and benefits the eyes, and clears the lung and dissolves phlegm. And both Chen and Bensky and his team say Cai Qianzi first appeared in the Shengang Ben Sao Jing, that's the Divine Husbandman's classic of the Materia Medica, in the 2nd century CE, making it among the first herbs in written form and quite old. So there you go, very, very old herb, or something similar to it according to Chinese medicine. Comparisons and combinations. There weren't any direct comparisons or combinations for this herb in our literature searches. EasyAyurveda.com does list several commonly used Ayurvedic compounds that contain Plantago ovata, including Constawin capsule, Laxo herb powder, Golax powder, and Laxo Gold capsule. Contents. So drugs.com has a great summary of the chemistry of Plantago ovata. So Plantago constituents include acids, e.g. benzoic, caffeic, chlorogenic, cinnamic, p-cumaric, fumaric, salicylic, ursolic, vanillic, and ascorbic. Includes alkaloids such as boschniakine, and amino acids, alanine, asparagine, histidine, and lysine. The seeds are coated with mucilage, 20 to 30%, located only in the epidermis of the testa or seed. Other plant carbohydrates such as saccharose, stachyose, sorbitol, and tyrosol have also been reported. Leaf mucilage has also been reported and includes polysaccharides containing rhamnose, L-arabinose, mannose, galactose, and dextrose, all sugars. Additionally, the seeds contain fixed oil, protein, iridoids, and tannins. Flavonoids found in Plantago include epigenin, bicaline, and scuteolariine. Iridoids found in Plantago are aucubin, plantarin. Plantarinina. You would think I would study these things ahead of time, but I don't. Plantarinoloside. I'm sure that's not pronounced properly. It's a big word, so I'm not even going to spell it. And a caboside. Other components of the plant include choline, fat, resin, steroids, and vitamins. Safras et al. Say it possesses 22.6% arabinose and 74.6% xylose with a small amount of other sugars. So let's talk about the science around this. So according to Cooperman, remember I said Cooperman is from the website consumerlab.com, and they have really great monographs on all this. So according to Cooperman, the psyllium husk is about 90% fiber, most of which, about 80% of the fiber, is soluble fiber. The soluble fiber can attract and bind water, absorbing about 10 times its weight in water, forming a non-fermentable, that's important, viscous gel. In the gut, this gel, 1, occupies volume and slows digestion, leading to fullness and helping to regulate blood sugar levels. And 2, softens and adds bulk to stool, providing a laxative effect. The gel may also bind to and reduce the absorption of a variety of compounds, which may explain its cholesterol-lowering effect, but also its ability to reduce absorption of medicines, which is why you want to separate medicines from taking this. The remaining 20% of the fiber in psyllium husk is insoluble fiber that can also add bulk to stool. Cooperman continues to say psyllium may be useful as a laxative and in treating fecal incontinence, ulcerative colitis, or UC, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, appetite and hunger control, sugar control, and lowering cholesterol. He says psyllium is the only type of supplemental fiber recommended by the American Gastroenterological Association, or the AGA, as a first-line therapy for individuals with chronic constipation not due to an underlying disease, particularly those with low intake of dietary fiber. However, there appears to be insufficient evidence for the use of psyllium in occasional constipation. A task force of gastroenterology experts says psyllium may be useful in reducing fecal incontinence. There does not appear to be good evidence supporting the use of psyllium in ulcerative colitis. In fact, I'd be a little concerned that even in powder form, the seeds and husk might be a little bit irritating to ulcerative colitis. So I'd be cautious with ulcerative colitis, using this in ulcerative colitis. Having said that, if someone's taking it and getting relief from it, I'm the last person to tell them to stop it. There is some evidence it can be helpful for irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, as demonstrated in a small study of children. So take that with a little bit of grain of salt because of the small number and also the fact that it's children, not adults. While there have been some positive small short-term studies funded by companies, there does not appear to be strong evidence for the use of psyllium in appetite and hunger control and weight loss. A meta-analysis, love my meta-analyses, meta-analysis showed benefit for diabetics taking psyllium, showing significant reduction in triglycerides, low-density lipoprotein, fasting blood sugar, and hemoglobin A1C. So that right there means that it's helpful for diabetes and for helping cholesterol. So our 2 questions that we had are answered here. It is believed psyllium helps sugar levels by binding sugar and reducing its absorption. There does not appear to be a significant evidence of type 2 diabetes prevention with supplementation. So it can help with sugar control once you have diabetes, but it does not seem to prevent diabetes. LDL and total cholesterol do appear to be lowered with psyllium supplementation. And rat studies have shown wound healing and anti-inflammatory actions. Okay, I threw that in there because we kind of mentioned there might be some anti-inflammatory action going on, but it's in rats, so that does not mean it's in humans in any way, shape, or form. So drug-herb interactions, when psyllium or Plantago ovata was combined with levodopa, Cmax, which is the overall maximum levels of the drug, is reduced, and overall bioavailability of levodopa was improved. So that's interesting. There's some speculation that concomitant administration, so administration at the same time with other drugs, may slow the absorption of the drug. This is not even an opinion, and there's no supporting evidence, but kind of makes sense, so I don't know. Taking both a laxative and psyllium could increase the risk of hyperkalemia, according to the PDR for herbal medicines. Hyperkalemia is too much potassium in the blood, and that can be life-threatening. A study of 4 male subjects, only 4, showed lower carbamazepine bioavailability when taken with Plantago seeds. Way too small to make definitive answers out of it, but it is something to kind of be aware of in patients who might be taking carbamazepine. Taking lithium and psyllium together could decrease plasma levels and efficacy of lithium, which is a anti-manic drug. So if someone has mania, you can affect that. Having said all of this, the American Herbal Product Association's Botanical Safety Handbook puts this herb in interaction class A, herbs for which no clinically relevant interactions are expected. They do recommend taking other drugs 1 hour prior to and several hours after psyllium to avoid interference with absorption. And finally, cupromin. This is more of a caution. In fact, I will move it under that, but I'm going to mention it now. Cupromin says psyllium can cause bloating, gas, diarrhea if taking too much, constipation if taken without enough fluid, and allergies. So here we talk about concerns of this. We just mentioned what cupromin's concerns were. According to the PDR for herbal medicines, psyllium is contraindicated in patients who have pathological narrowing in the gastrointestinal tract, intestinal obstruction, obstruction or threatening obstruction of the bowel or ileus. That is all known as ileus and ileus. Fecal impaction, difficulty swallowing or esophageal narrowing, or difficulties in regulating diabetes mellitus. They continue under the heading of precautions and adverse reactions. Gastrointestinal distension and flatulence, potentially severe but rare allergic reactions, including sneezing, chest congestion and wheezing, and appetite suppression. Psyllium contains various antigens, and cases of anaphylaxis and asthma have been reported. Continuing with the PDR for herbal medicines, incorrect administration procedures with too little fluid can cause the product to swell and lead to obstruction of the esophagus or of the intestine, particularly with older people. And patients with exocrine pancreatic insufficiency should avoid use of psyllium due to inhibitory actions on pancreatic lipase. And finally, the American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook puts this herb in Safety Class 2D. The General Safety Class 2 states herbs for which the following use restriction apply unless otherwise directed by an expert qualified in the use of the described substance. And then that sub 2D states other specific use restrictions as noted. And these restrictions include taking with 8 ounces of liquid. You got to take it with 8 ounces of liquid. And they do have contraindications, but they're very similar to what we just discussed with the PDR for herbal medicines. So those are all kind of all put together there. And that's pretty much it. We made it through despite my coughing. I apologize. There we go. Summary. We started our discussion today by talking about cannabis and how it acts on the body and how it acts according to Chinese medicine. From there, we did our deep dive into Plantago ovata or Blond Psyllium, a very commonly used herb used to increase fiber and help excretion. While generally considered to be safe, enough fluid should be taken and certain conditions should avoid its use. Overall, another fascinating and helpful herb, and as I said at the beginning, incredibly commonly used herb. You know, if I was just hanging out with several of my friends last night, and none of them would take any herbs, except for one of them is taking regular psyllium every day to help with his various stuff. And so this is the one herb out of all my friends that they're taking. So very commonly used herb. In our next episode, we will be exploring another interesting Chinese herb, Shi Xin, Asari herba, or asarum, in English asarum, or Chinese wild ginger. This herb is in the Chinese medical subcategory of warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior under the category of release the exterior herbs. Or is it? One of our books disagrees with that. Let's figure this out. It can be an important herb in certain circumstances, especially as a potential substitute for some of the functions of the banned ma huang or ephedra. But is it safe? Is it readily available, or is it banned? We are going to find out. And as usual, we will be exploring something a little different. Please join us for this intriguing episode. See you in 2 weeks. And I'd really like to thank you for listening today. if you like this podcast, please do us a humongous favor. Give us a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast app, or just even better, just subscribe. We would love for you to be a subscriber to our podcast, and we thank you in advance for even considering that. And remember, you can get CU's, continuing education units, and NCC AOM, that's National Certification Commission of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, professional development activities, or PDAs, at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. That's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org. And you can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com, or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. That's SPERBSHERBS.com. I need to spell that out because I used to teach in Australia for many years. And whenever I'd say herb, one of my cheekier students would say, "Do you mean herbs, Dr. Sperber?" And I wasn't a doctor at that point, Mr. Sperber. And I said, "No, I mean herbs." So the H is silent in the U.S. It's not silent in the British system. So spurbsherbs.com. Thank you very much. And as usual, we have quite the bibliography. Today was actually quite a big bibliography. And that's it. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Spurbs Herbs. The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Janelle,
Timothy Dobbins,
Rogers,
Campbell,